Before you turn out the lights, before the house settles, before your thoughts finally quiet, stay with me for just a moment longer. This is One More Before Sleep, short horror stories meant to be heard in the dark, when the world feels still and your imagination does the rest. These are tales of quiet dread, lingering unease, and the feeling that something isn't quite right, even when everything looks the same as it always has. So get comfortable, lower the lights, and listen closely. There's always time for one more before sleep.
The Tattie Bogle, written by Hill Country writer, read by Madsparrow and Jaivuc. Friday. Rowena stopped to catch her breath. 8 miles in, her shoulders ached from the pack on her back. Once again, she'd packed too much weight. It was a hard habit to break, but she would have to if she wanted to go on any truly long-distance hikes with her boyfriend Jason. Her GPS told her that the creek was less than a quarter mile ahead. She should be coming out of the woods any minute now. She'd been delayed getting started, thanks to a pile-up on the interstate, and if she didn't reach her coordinates soon, she'd be setting up in the dark. Sighing, she adjusted the straps on her pack, moving the weight from her shoulders to her hips, and continued on her way. Each step seemed to drain the energy out of her as she trudged forward. Almost there, almost there, almost there. The mantra rolled through her mind as she plodded forward. It was Friday. She planned to camp 2 nights and leave out first thing Sunday morning. She just had to make it the last little bit, and she'd have a full day to relax and recover before hiking back to where she had left her Subaru. Finally, she reached the edge of a forest and looked out over a gently sloping field. She resisted the urge to try and slide down the slope all the way to the creek below. With a renewed spring in her step, she nearly skipped the rest of the way down the field to the creek's edge. Rowena set up her one-person tent and stored her pack inside, before climbing back up to the slope to gather sticks for a fire. She got back as the sun began to slip below the hill on the opposite side of the creek where she made camp. On the crest of a hill, a man stood, staring down at her, arms outstretched. No, not a man, just a scarecrow.
You mean the Tattie Bogle, didn't you?
Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. Rowena suppressed a shudder as she recalled the folklore stories her grandmother had told her from Scotland. Grandma loved to tell stories from her home country, especially the ones that frightened her grandchildren. Deliberately turning her back to the scarecrow, Rowena carefully set out the kindling for a fire. Soon, she sat by a cheerful blaze as she ate her dinner of crackers and a packet of tuna. Not exactly a feast, but good enough. After a small bag of trail mix with chocolate chips for dessert, she cleaned up her sight, ensuring all the trash was packed safely away in her pack. She unlaced her boots and stripped out of her socks. The soft grass felt good on her bare feet, and she decided a soak in the river would feel amazing. Rowena laid on the bank of the creek, sticking her sore feet into the icy water as she stared up at the endless pinpricks of light against the midnight black of the sun. Rowena closed her eyes and let her mind wander. She wished Jason could have come. He would have loved this. He was the rugged outdoorsman type, just like her father had been before his death. She wished more than anything that her father could have met her boyfriend. They would have become best friends or enemies. Rowena had her money on the former. Her father had been the best. Thoughts of her father swam through her head as she remembered sitting around campfires with him in their backyard, where he taught her the basics of firecraft and how it applied to relationships.
You have to start small. Let the spark grow. Then, when you're sure you have a good flame, you add more sticks as the fire grows. Then, you have a roaring blaze that can keep you safe and warm.
Her father had told her that's how he had won over his mother as the son of a penniless coal miner from the Appalachian Mountains. They had met in Berea, Kentucky, where her mother attended college. They had been married a year later. Rowena wasn't sure when she slipped into unconsciousness and when memories turned into dreams, but her cries of terror pulled her back to the land of the living. Her heart beat in her chest as fragments of dreams swam through her head. She remembered fire and screams and... She glanced back up at the hill on the other side of the creek. The scarecrow still stood in the same place, straw hands swaying in the wind. She felt the sting in her feet as she realized they had gone numb in the cold stream. She pulled them out and walked carefully back to the fire. She sat on the far side of the fire, keeping it between her and the scarecrow. The dream swirled through her head along with the stories that her grandmother had told of the Tattie Bogle. Her father screaming, telling her to run. Jason calling out for her, on his knees, crying. Admonishing herself, she waited until the fire burned down to embers, then crawled into her tent. She rummaged through her backpack until she retrieved the .22 caliber Ruger SR-22 she always carried with her when backpacking. It wouldn't stop much more than an angry woodchuck, but its reassuring feeling in her hand relaxed her. Soon, in the sleeping bag's warm embrace, Rowena drifted off into a dreamless sleep. Once, she awoke to the sound of wind blowing against her tent, but it soon subsided. She was soon back, asleep for the rest of the night. Saturday. Rowena awoke to the sun shining brightly through the yellow nylon of her tent and a gentle breeze brushing something against her ear. The fog cleared from her mind as she realized that she shouldn't feel a breeze inside her tent. She rolled over to see small pieces of straw scattered around her pillow. One of them had been tickling her ear from a gap in the tent flap that was allowing the breeze in. When the Tattie Bogle comes to visit you, he leaves you straw under your pillow, Rowena mumbled to herself as she fumbled for her gun, unaware that she had spoken. Her heart raced as she searched desperately for the pistol, but it was gone. Overcome by a sudden rage, Rowena shoved through the flap of her tent, nearly ripping the zipper from the fabric in her haste. Her eyes immediately went to the hill on the other side of the creek. She looked around for a sign that anyone had been walking around her campsite. But aside from some more straw scattered around, the site looked just like it had the night before.
"You're being ridiculous. Get it together, girl,"
she thought as she forced her breathing to slow. She inhaled, counted to 5, then exhaled. Calm, she went back into her tent to do a careful search. The pistol was where she had left it. In her panic, she had thrown a t-shirt on top of it. Laughing at her own foolishness, Rowena went to add some small sticks to her fire, but the entire fire was burnt out. Not a single hot ember remained. She put her hand to the ground. It was cold. The fire had been out for a long time. She remembered what she had thought was wind in the night. Maybe it had been the sound of rustling straw. Angry, Rowena went back into the tent for her boots and pistol. She had enough of this. She was going to hike over to the other hill and burn the scarecrow to the ground. Then she would pack up and hike out. Armed with her pistol and the lighter given to her by her late father, she stormed across the small creek and began the climb to the other side, drawing ever closer to the scarecrow that had become her obsession. Her anxiety rose with every step as she neared the homemade dummy.
Run! Go, now! Forget the tent. Forget your bag. Grab your cell phone and keys and run back to the car. Without your gear, you can do it in less than 2 hours. You can be home to Jason in 4.
Rowena's mind screamed at her, the same thoughts pounding through her head over and over with each step as she neared the top of the hill. The scarecrow stood as still as ever when Rowena approached. The air was still, and it didn't so much as rustle as she circled it. Rowena glanced around. No one as far as she could see. No one to see her light this stuffed monster up and let it burn. She briefly wondered why a scarecrow would be placed in the middle of nowhere, but decided she didn't care, as she ignited her lighter and held it to the straw sticking out of the feet. The fire spread quickly, racing up the legs of the effigy until the entire scarecrow was engulfed in flame. Rowena laughed in maniacal triumph as she watched the flames. Her laughter turned to screams when a sudden flash of lightning tore across the sky, horizon to horizon, followed by a deafening peal of thunder. A hard rain began to pour down from a suddenly overcast sky. She screamed and ran as small pieces of hail began to hit her, stinging her skin. She sprinted down the hill, sparing one last glimpse of the burning scarecrow. She couldn't be sure, but it seemed to have been extinguished before burning up completely. Rowena lost her footing, suddenly slipping on the sodden grass and rolled down the hill. She flailed out in an attempt to stop herself, but tumbled all the way to the bottom, hitting her head on a large creek stone. Rowena crawled to her feet, determined to make for the woods and the trail back to her car. Even in this heavy rainfall, the ground beneath the heavy canopy of trees would be dry enough to run on. All she needed was her phone and her keys from the tent. To hell with the rest. She could blame leaving it all behind on the rain. Jason would tease her, but she didn't care. She tore into her tent, rummaging through her backpack. She spun as the wind tore the tent flap open. The Tattie Bogle loomed. Rowena screamed.
Sunday. Jason stepped out of the woods and looked down the slope. His sigh of relief was short-lived as he saw Rowena's tent near the bank of the creek. Something was wrong. The tent was knocked over, the guy lines twisted or torn free from the ground. He broke into a run as he called her for the 100th time that day. When Rowena hadn't checked in on Sunday morning at the time she had agreed to, he'd begun calling her frantically. After an hour, he had driven to where she had parked her car and hiked in, following the route she had left for him in case of an emergency. Jason heard the tinkle of Rowena's ringtone coming from inside the collapsed tent. Before he could reach for it, he saw her body face down in the water on the far side of the creek. Jason was dialing 911 as he splashed through the water to where she lay, desperate for a miracle. He fell to his knees, pulling Rowena's lifeless body out of the creek where it had laid face down in the water. He cradled her lifeless body in his arms as tears fell down his cheeks and onto hers. By the time he had pulled her out of the water, she had been long dead. The blood from her head wound had all washed away. He rocked back and forth, calling her name, begging for her to come back to him. As he waited for the police, Jason looked behind him. At the top of the hill, someone had erected 2 scarecrows looking down over the valley.